Welcome everyone to Mythology Monday. Whether it's morning where you are like it is here, afternoon, night, or I don't know, otherwise. So if you missed it yesterday on the Homebuddies Discord, which you should absolutely join if you're not a member. Is Nightbot working today? I couldn't get on. Okay, it seems to be working. I couldn't log on to the Nightbot website, so that was annoying. I was gonna update a couple things. Okay. Anyway, so on the Homebuddies Discord yesterday, we watched the movie Troy. Oh, the movie Troy. I will say, I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily a hardcore purist, and I've talked about this. I think I mentioned this on the Discord. When it comes to movie adaptations of things, I fully understand that not every bit of source material makes for a good movie, and being super attached to every detail from that source material might not make it in. I totally get that. But if you purposefully change the story and ignore things or change things or add things, number one, there should be a good reason, and it should fit with the theme, and it should make sense like why you changed it. Number two, you should do it well. And then overall, the number three, tying into number three, it should make a good final product. If you go through and you change stuff and it makes for arguably a story that makes less sense or is less entertaining, then I think you need to re-examine why you ditched the source material to begin with. So that's my overall thoughts on adaptations and going into movies. And the writer of Troy has gone on record saying that when they were working on the script, they looked at when there was an issue of do we keep, I forget exactly what the word is, but I'm paraphrasing. When they were looking at the question of do we keep things accurate to the myth or do we change things for the movie, I'm always going to think about what's better for the movie, something like that. In other words, the specific details of the source material is not as important as making an entertaining film. And again, I get that, but I think there's a little bit more to it. Cameron talked about the fact that it seems as though Troy was made based on the success of Gladiator. So the idea was, let's make a loosely historical, like Braveheart, exactly. And that's probably the best example, or at least a really good one, of a movie that is based on something historical. Obviously, the movie didn't get everything right, but the movie is certainly entertaining, very popular, all of that sort of thing. Right, it has to be Hudsonizer. Yes, it has to be 100% accurate. No, and again, it doesn't have to be, but yeah, exactly. Arsenal Roy 2K, like the King Arthur movies that have no magic. It's like, and that I mentioned this during the watch along yesterday. It's like, okay, well, if you make a decision to change something drastically, do something interesting with that. And the biggest point that comes across in the movie Troy is the almost utter lack of gods. Now, if you were with us 10 months ago, because I've been streaming for 10 months now, when we talked about the Iliad, lots of different translations. These are some that I like. The Iliad is a lot. There's a lot of gods in this poem, in this book. A lot of gods. They talk, they show up, they have meetings. There's an entire book that takes place up with the gods in Olympus. They're fighting on the battlefield. They're helping out their favorites. They're hurting. It's really important. And we'll talk in a minute about like the whole reasons why the Trojan War happened. A lot of it has to do with the gods. So to completely or almost completely cut that out of the story, yeah, I don't know. That, to me at least, it didn't feel satisfactory why they did it and how they handled it. And again, you could certainly make an argument, and you could certainly go in a direction of like, okay, we're making this ancient civilization, but we're cutting out the gods completely, or like everybody dismisses the gods, and like do something interesting with that. But they're sort of like, we're gonna talk about the gods every so often, and we're gonna use sort of a BS plot point about how, oh, this character is a priestess, so like she's a virgin, but then she'll become the love interest, but who cares? And I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, the Transformers movie with King Arthur. Man, I can't stand those Michael Bay Transformers movies. Oh, Clash of the Titans. That's another movie, another franchise we could probably do several episodes just talking about that. I like the old Clash of the Titans movie. Okay, so we looking at Troy. First of all, it's an interesting use, a case study of talking about names. And we talk about names a lot. We've talked about names of ancient characters and mythological characters a lot with Emma, and how they interact with sort of modern adaptations and things. And again, I've welcome everyone who is dropping in. We're doing it. We're talking about Troy and myth and adaptations and things. I like I said, if you are just joining and you're not familiar, I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree in classics, in ancient Latin and Greek. So like it's been a while, but I did do a lot of study and a lot of work on these subjects. You can get really locked into like, oh, everything has to be pronounced accurately, but the older and wiser I get, the much less focused I am on things like that, because pronunciation is, in many ways, and this could be a controversial statement, but in many ways, pronunciation and pronunciation guides are, they can be racist. They are certainly classist and colonial enforcing, and just ultimately like kind of bullshit, because the whole point of pronunciation is all about language and how language evolves, and names evolve, and yeah, it's just not that big a deal. If we all know who we're talking about, like, it doesn't really, I'm not going to go and force everyone saying the same thing all the time. And in the movie Troy, they certainly take some pronunciations of names that like everybody knows and everybody uses, and then they do some weird ones, but it's fine because at least it's consistent within the movie, I think. So normally, if you're talking about the Iliad, you would refer to the king of Troy as Priam, right? They do an alternate, they say like Priam, but that's fine. And again, like, it's consistent, so it's not that big of a deal. I was just talking about the Underworld movies, which I really like, and I was watching the Underworld. I just watched 1, 2, and 3, and those movies do a weird thing. The main Lycan for, well, arguably, and the one who sort of set the Lycans on their current path, is a character whose name is Lucian. But some of the characters in those movies specifically call him Lucian rather than Lucian. And it seems to be a choice that, like, we'll have some characters pronounce the name differently, but it's kind of jarring at some points. And I don't know. I don't know what, like, the backstory is, but it could be interesting. Ooh, Ozai, that's a good quote. I cannot forgive you. Yeah. So anyway, and then like most people, again, studying or reading the Iliad would call Agamemnon's brother Menelaus. In the movie, they call him like Menelaus or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. So anyway, but again, that just goes to show you that exact pronunciations are really not that important. It's not that important. And again, if they were trying for total accuracy, like it would be Achilles rather than Achilles. So, doesn't matter. Leave it alone. Okay. The gods. Now, why are the gods so important in the Iliad? Well, first of all, the gods are one of the main reasons why the Trojan War was even fought, right? Now, there's not just one root cause for the Trojan War. There are multiple. Oh, and again, I used to love doing this when I was a teaching assistant at UCSB, and we were when we got to the Iliad, because I would take the entire wall of, I think it was still blackboards at that point. Like we were just transitioning into dry erase, but I would take the entire wall, and on one end of the wall I would start with Eris and Thetis, and start moving in, and the other side of the wall I would start with Helen and her whole story, and then I would add all the details and all the names, and we would meet in the middle at the Trojan War. And yeah, I always love talking about that. But essentially, yes, coming into the Trojan War, in here, in the myth, there's several causes and reasons, but yes, a lot of them have to do with the gods. Eris, the goddess of strife, gets mad because she wasn't invited to a wedding, the wedding that happened to be between Achilles' parents, because Achilles' mom was really, really hot, and Zeus really, really wanted her, but there was a prophecy that whoever married her, that their son would be more powerful than the father. Now again, Zeus knew from firsthand experience what it's like to overthrow your father, just like his father overthrew his grandfather. So he's like, oh, in this one case, I'm going to restrain myself. I'm going to keep it in my pants. But I also can't let any of the other gods marry Thetis, because if another god marries her, their child might be more powerful and might threaten me. So he specifically married Thetis off to a mortal, Peleus, who would then have the son Achilles. So they had this big wedding. Zeus basically made sure that all the gods were on board and attended the wedding so that it would go off without a hitch. And so they specifically did not invite Eris. And then there's all sorts of parables about this, about how like the one guest, the one emotion you don't want at your wedding is discord, which makes sense. It certainly is an idea that resonates. So they didn't invite Eris. Because of that, Eris got mad, and so she made, hey Emily, welcome. And then so she made the golden apple that was written on it, basically like for the fairest. She threw it in there. Three of the goddesses immediately claimed it. That's the what I'm looking for. Claimed it, saying, "Oh, well, that surely is for me." And then each looked at each other and like, "But it's not for you. It's for me." And so they needed a judge to judge the contest. They went down. They found poor Paris. I don't know if you would call him poor at that point, but Paris was a mere shepherd at that point, and the goddesses came to him and said, you have to decide who is the fairest among us. You have to choose who gets the apple. And of course, none of the gods and goddesses play fair, so they bribed, each goddess attempted to bribe Paris with fantastical things, power, skill in combat, or the hand of the most beautiful woman in the ancient world. So of course Paris chose Aphrodite. Thereafter, Aphrodite would always be a supporter of Paris and Troy, and also try to get the other gods on their side. Also, that made Athena and Hera hate Paris and Troy. So anytime you help out one god or goddess, you're going to piss off a bunch of the other ones. Comes with the territory. I know, right? Zeus showed restraint for like the one time. Here it is. Anyway, so we have all of that, and that is depending on the story. In some of the stories, Helen has more or less agency of her own, depending on the specific version of the story you read. Sometimes literally Paris just like goes and steals her. Sometimes Aphrodite casts her spells and weaves a net and traps her. And sometimes it's like straight up Helen just decides to go off with him. It just depends on the different versions. But in most cases, at least, there it is. I'm working through it. Let's put it that way. In most cases, while Helen is at Troy, she seems to be genuinely on the side of the Trojans. Like she's not there to double cross anybody or let the Greeks win or doing any kind of tricks like that. And then again, Helen survives the Trojan War. Menelaus survives the Trojan War. We'll get to some of the deaths in the movie Troy. But afterwards, she does go back home with Menelaus, and we see them together in the Odyssey, and they're sort of living happily ever after. Like nothing ever happened. They talk about the Trojan War. They talk about the return, but they're cool again. So, hey, let that be a lesson to everybody that even in times of strife, marriages can ignore and forgive and forget crazy things that happen, I guess. So, like I said, the only gods that are mentioned in the movie, I believe they mention Aphrodite once in reference to Paris, that they say, oh, Paris, beloved of Aphrodite. I might have been imagining it, but I think they said that somewhere toward the beginning. The only other god that's really mentioned is Apollo, right? Achilles storms the beach, is the first ship there, which is not canonical. In the Iliad, it talks about the first Greek hero to reach the shores of Troy was Protesilaus, whose name sort of means like first to attack. And he's also the first one to die at Troy. But in the movie, Achilles gets there first, runs up, kills a bunch of Trojans, and then happens to see a temple to Apollo that's sitting right there. Runs in, slaughters the priests, cuts the head off the statue, just showing absolute disrespect and disregard for that god in particular. But then saves like the hot priestess who happens to be working there. All right. The very opening lines of the Iliad is "Sing, goddess, of the wrath of Achilles." Again, depending on how you translate it. Now, what is the wrath of Achilles? Why is Achilles raging at the beginning of the Iliad? Now, remember, the Iliad is very, very specifically about that. The Iliad is a book that is all about the arc of Achilles' rage. It's not a book about the Trojan War beginning to end. We don't get the beginning of the war. We start off 9 or so years into the war. We don't get the end of the war. So it's, like I said, it's very specific. It's about the rage, the arc of the rage of Achilles. They didn't touch on this in the movie. Achilles goes to Troy for glory, for fame. He doesn't care about riches. He doesn't care about women. He was offered. He knew there was a prophecy that Achilles could live a happy life, and then no one would ever remember him. And a happy long life. He could live to an old age. Or he is a fan of men. That is true. Or he could go to Troy. He could go fight, gain tons of glory, die young, but his name would be remembered forever. Which is arguably what happened. So, yeah. So all right. So why is Achilles mad? All right. Achilles is mad because canonically in the Iliad, they get to Troy. They fight. At one point, both Agamemnon and Achilles get a slave woman. Well, they capture women that they make their slaves. Yeah, we'll get to Patroclus. We will absolutely talk about Patroclus in just a minute. So both Agamemnon and Achilles have a woman that they've taken captive from the fighting, and they're their slaves. Now, in the movie, it totally glosses over what this really meant, right? We only see one captive woman. It's Briseis with Achilles, and she's just in his tent, and he's not treating her very well. Later on, they'll fall in love, but not. It's anyway. In the Iliad, in the ancient stories, capturing captives like that is part of your honor and how much glory you had in the battle. Whoever contributed most to the battle got the most allocation of captives, of loot. Now again, Achilles doesn't care about those things as physical objects, but just as a representation of how much glory he got in the fighting and how much it'll be talked about and related and made into tales. Yeah, I mean, slaves equal money, 100% for sure. But yes, it's the glory that Achilles cares about. So in the Iliad, they both get a captured woman. But unfortunately for Agamemnon, it turns out that his captured woman is the daughter of a priest of Apollo. So again, this does sort of tie into what they played with in the movie a little bit. That priest to Apollo prays to Apollo. And because Apollo is there's a really cool thing in Greek mythology and in other mythologies, but Apollo is the god of healing among his many attributes. But because he's the god of healing, he's also the god of plague and disease, because you're sort of like both, it's the different poles of the same axis, whatever. So the priest of Apollo prays to Apollo, says, "They've captured my daughter. Please hurt them, make them give her back." So Apollo comes down, like literally Apollo comes in and unleashes a plague among the Greeks. The Greeks pray, "Oh my God, what is happening? How can we solve this?" And one of the Greeks priests says, "Yeah, you've pissed off Apollo. You gotta talk to this priest. What do you want?" The priest says, "You gotta give me back my daughter." And then Agamemnon says, "Okay." In one of the rare cases when he's sort of forced to do what's best for the entire army, he gives the girl back, but then he says, "Wait a minute. I'm the leader of this whole expedition. I can't lose my captive, and Achilles over there still has his captive. I'm going to take Achilles' captive." That is what literally, that's the beginning of the Iliad, right? Achilles loses his captive. His glory is reduced. That's the only reason why he even went to Troy. God damn it. So that starts him on his path of rage, which is a cool story, but not how they decided to do it in the movie. And yes, I am critical of the movie Troy, and I watched it in the theater when it came out. I think this was man, have I seen it in between? I maybe watched one other time, but this was definitely probably the second. This was probably the first time I've watched it beginning to end since the first time I saw it. It just seems to me that like a lot of the characters, just the motivations for what they're doing, and especially when they change course, just seems so shallow. And it's partly due to like just cutting out all this great source material. I don't know. Maybe just me. Now I will say that there are aspects to the movie that get things wrong and are anachronistic that I don't particularly care about, that I'm totally fine with. The architecture is very hit and miss in that movie as far as like ancient accuracy. It doesn't matter. It's a movie. I don't care about any of that stuff. And as I said, the walls of Troy look cool. There is, you want, right, very Hollywood for sure. You want, whenever you're doing an adaptation or a depiction of Troy, you want it to be like, holy crap. I mean, the walls of Troy were built by the gods in other ancient stories that come down, but they were famously in the ancient world, even in historical times, people thought that Troy existed. It's a long and complicated question whether Troy actually existed. There are a couple of sites in modern day Turkey that are possibly Troy, but none of them quite fit, and the archaeology doesn't quite. It's very complicated, but anyway, the idea is though that even for the Greeks who had their palaces back in Greece, that the walls of Troy were like, holy crap, they were like bigger than anything. My son is doing a weird stretching toys like all across the house. Yeah, they found a site that works for certain depictions of Troy, but then like the dating for when it was destroyed doesn't quite fit. It's, like I said, it's very complicated. And again, there might have been more research done in the last few years that I'm not aware of, so it's certainly possible. But yeah, the idea is like these walls were just completely, like, even if the Greeks fought the Trojans on the field of battle and defeated every warrior, it's like, okay, well now what? Now how do we get in? These walls are so gigantic. Also, a key point to the Trojan horse is that they had to is that in the actual stories is that they actually had to dismantle part of the walls to get the horse in, which is why the rest of the Greeks were able. Whatever. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. Aaron's, yes, Age of Mythology is on our list to look at, probably with Pete on the Myths and Video Games show at some point. So anyway, the architecture, it's fine. It looks, the Troy certainly looked impressive, and that's all you really need. The armor and the weapons that they used in the movie, again, hit and miss. Some of it was good. You saw some of the Greeks, not the main Greeks, but just like all the background Greeks, they had the shield that kind of looks like a figure eight. That's good. That's what that we know that the ancient people had shields that look like that. The weird kind of circle with the little moon cutout that Achilles uses, that's not. Yeah, my Nightbot is still showing things that I had timers from Saturday. Weird. Oh well. Fix that eventually. Yeah, and so there are some anachronistic things with that, but whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Also, I do want to mention that one thing that almost everything gets wrong, and this I think is also because of how do I put this? Most people have an idea of ancient Greek and Roman statuary and buildings as being this beautiful, pristine marble and metals, bronze especially, just smooth, beautiful, austere almost. But here's the thing. All those marble statues you see from ancient Greece and Rome, they were all painted, completely head to toe painted in all sorts of crazy bright colors. Yes, Zardoz, yes, Ozai. They were, and we have evidence of this. We know this. There are examples that we found of statues that are painted. There are places like Pompeii and Herculaneum where we can actually see the colors that are on the walls. There's evidence. There's all this microscopic stuff. We know how they made their paints. We know from what beetles were crushed up, what and like for makeup, like we know all of this stuff. But it's just because of just this sort of overall idea from from seeing statues before it was well known, and then from seeing these classic movies and things that, oh, we just see these white marble statues. It's like, no, wasn't like that. Some of the video games have been better about that, right? The Assassin's Creed one, like that had a lot of color in it, so that was cool. But yeah, it's always, and I always want more of that, but I don't know. I don't know if that's the filmmakers specifically, if they hear from their, I mean, I assume they have consultants on board for some of this at least, and the consultants say, okay, well, so you're gonna brightly paint, brightly color everything, and they're like, are we though? So I'd like to think that they get that information and then it's a deliberate choice that they don't do it. But why would they have experts? Who knows? Um, yeah, I don't know. I would love to see a big production really embrace that and show it off in a really cool way. And I think that could change people's perspectives a little bit. Because again, even to this day, I think a lot of people have that image of just the plain white marble and think that's what all ancient stuff was. But it's not. Yeah, casting is something. A whole bunch of white dudes in that movie. A lot of white dudes. A lot of white dudes. And I will say, I highly recommend the Netflix. Well, it's on Netflix. The series. It's called. I always forget the name of it. It's like Troy Fall of a Kingdom or something. I don't know, something like that. But there's a. I think it's a series. I think it's like a mini series. I think it's like 6 episodes or something. But it's on Netflix. It's super cool. It is way more accurate to the Iliad. It has some really neat diversity among the cast, especially with regards to the gods, which I think is really cool. I highly recommend you go and watch that, and we can talk about that if anybody does. Yeah, so the painting is all weird in the movie, or they just forget about it. Somebody, I can't remember who it was. Somebody mentioned, I didn't get a chance to respond to it during the watch along yesterday. Was it Savage Punch or Solkatu? I think it was an S name, but asking about warriors using blunt weapons, because in the movie, my favorite character, oh, Ajax, what the hell were they thinking? The character called Ajax in the movie uses this weird hammer thing. I mean, I guess it's kind of like technically a war hammer, because one side is blunt, the other side has a point to it. Oh, so that's the Tyler Mane character. Tyler Mane, former wrestler, famous for playing Sabretooth in the first X-Men movie. More than one movie, I don't know. He plays Ajax. At least the second time we see him fight, he actually does have a shield. But man, I don't know. Probably the less said about that, the better. But anyway, yes. Somebody pointed out during the watch long that blunt weapons are that's wildly anachronistic for the ancient world. You have to remember that we're talking Bronze Age. The the weapons that they were using were crap. Weapons broke all the time. Yes, 100% Ozai. So I mean, ideally you wanted something at least with an edge, so it would cut, or you could stab with it. You're not trying to hit something with it, because yeah, it was. I mean, obviously they would use metal tools and implements in the when they were crafting weapons, but it was not the case that they were making blunt weapons to hit things with in battle. No, that's something that came much later. Uh, yeah, there it is. There were no people of color in ancient history. Oof. Yeah, that's also a choice that they went with. Also, famously, if you go online and you look up like critiques of Troy as far as accuracy and things like that, one of the one of the things that a lot of people point to is that in one scene you see a shepherd moving things behind the main characters, and they're a bunch of llamas, and llamas are not from that part of the world, but again, like that falls into the category of things that I don't care about. It didn't take me out of the movie. Whatever, it's fine. So there are aspects of the movie that are technically wrong that I don't care about. Again, I'm not I'm not so focused on every detail. Yeah, so I talked about Briseis, the captured woman, and how she has to deal with the gods. And again, like it would have been so cool if they did both of the captured women, and so much more interesting, but they didn't. Oh well, what are you gonna do? Helen is portrayed interestingly in the movie. The well-known llama herders of ancient Greece. Yeah. Yeah, so there's that one line about how Helen says that Sparta was never my home, which is weird. It's not emphasized enough to be sure that that line is meant to be that like I never felt at home in Sparta, or like I'm not really from there. I know it's weird. It's kind of it's an ambiguous line that doesn't make a lot of. I wish it was explained a little bit more, because again, Helen is queen of Sparta because her parents were king and queen of Sparta. She grew up there, and Menelaus came in and married her and became king. So like it was her place, but she's like, no, I don't even care anymore. That's fine. And again, that Netflix series deals with Helen really well. I really like the Helen in that one. I forget who played her. Somebody famous. Oh. Hey, buddy, how's it going? Why are you wearing one sock? I do see it. Yeah. Where's your other sock? You don't know? Okay. Well, one sock. Yeah, buddy. All the way over there. Wow. Okay. I know. My kids at least, love to be in one sock. They also refuse to wear socks that match. It's fine. Oh, well, there you go. Okay. Got it. Thank you, buddy. Okay. Yeah. So lots and lots could be said about Patroclus in the movie. There is, of course, a modern fascination and appreciation of shipping characters, right? That's super current. Yes, Tiny Chris. We're talking about everyone's favorite movie, Troy. So shipping characters is one thing, but the idea of Patroclus and Achilles being more than friends literally goes back to the ancient world. Now, I will say, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, there is no explicit mention of them being lovers. It's not even like really implied. They love one another. They have love for each other, but Homer, who we don't know that Homer really existed, but the entity we refer to as Homer doesn't say that that they were lovers. Other stories from the ancient times do depict them as lovers. So you could do a story in which they're not lovers, but then to forcibly tack on that they're cousins, as though to say, look, they may be close, but they're not banging, they're cousins, okay? Just seems like, why? But hey, that's the way they chose. That's the way they chose to do it in the movie. Patroclus is good point, Joe Vexani. Kissing cousins, right? Yeah. I certainly think that if they were going to make a movie like Troy now, even if they were going to go in some of these particular directions, like leaving out the gods, doing this and that, they probably wouldn't make that choice again these days. But and somebody made a joke about, like, do I have toys from the movie? And Troy did not get a line of toys. I don't know if there was one planned and it just didn't do well enough. That often happens. But I mentioned there's a miniatures game called Infinity. It's a game out of Spain or Italy. I forget where it comes from. But anyway, in that game, there's it's a futuristic game, and there's a faction called Aleph, and it's sort of like a worldwide security program kind of thing. So it's all AI, and they make androids that are based on, yeah, Spain sounds about right. Anyway, so for their android characters that go out and keep the peace, in theory, they're all based on historical and mythological characters. So there's an Ajax, there's a Teucer, there's a Patroclus and a Hector and all these things, and there's an Achilles, and they very specific. There's been a couple different models of Achilles, but one of them very specifically, the head at least, is modeled after Brad Pitt in Troy. So that's arguably... Hey, Patty, how's it going? So in theory, like, you could take the head from that model and find a, like more of a Greek style character and put the head on and I guess make your own Troy Achilles. But yeah, so there is that. I do actually have this model. It's not painted, of course. Like most of my things are not painted. Oh, I guess you could do a Vigo. It's a cool model. It certainly didn't need to be Brad Pitted, but but it is cool. Thank you for the follow, Super Mega Ultra Hyper Force. Welcome. Yeah. So yeah, no toys. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've seen anybody do their own versions, because what oftentimes happens is you'll get an action movie, which again, no toys are made for it, but people will sculpt their own heads, especially, and then usually in 1/6 scale, so 12-inch scale figures, they'll sculpt a head, and then it'll get out there into the world. People will copy it, or they'll make their own 3D versions, and then you can just go buy the head and then stick it on, because there are enough action movies where the characters are pretty generic looking, and then it's just the actor's head. So you just buy the head and then you find a body that'll work with it and make. So there are people out there who make Kurt Russell heads and Bruce Willis heads, and then you can just put it on a body and then make it look like John McClane or whatever else. The timeline in the movie is utter garbage. Why? They make a build-up about how great Troy is, how Agamemnon really wants to go there and take it over and steal all of its riches. It seems like it's a tough thing to do, and they get there, and in just, 4 days, 4.5 days, boom, It's done. Yeah, not so much. In the Iliad and the Odyssey and other ancient stories, it's described that the war at Troy is just over 10 years long. It takes a long time to get through those walls and to get that city. Not in the movie. Not in the movie. It's real quick, real fast. So yeah, I talked about how they also sort of mangled the just the Achilles story itself. They shoehorned in this weird love story. It's a movie, not a series. I get it. But still, you can depict the flow of time even in a movie, even in a standalone movie. There are ways. But yeah, it's like what Achilles, we see at the beginning of the movie, he's ambivalent about fighting, or at least fighting for other people. He talks to his mom in the movie, even, and the mom gives him the choice. You can have a nice, happy life with a family. Your kids will remember you, but nobody after that, or you can go and achieve fame. So he goes to Troy. He dives off the ship and starts to kill people right away, seemingly like he wants a bunch of fame. But then, like, the girl stuff is all about Rome. I don't know. Eridan's they mangled quite a bit, yeah. But anyway, and again, there's just I understand the idea of taking out the gods, but it's just you just miss out on so much cool stuff. They did not do the Achilles in a dress part. Yeah, so when it was time to rally all the Greeks to go to Troy, Agamemnon was only able to do that because all of the so Helen, taking a few steps back, Helen was really beautiful and everybody wanted her. All of the kings wanted Helen, all of the kings of all the little Greek city-states at the time. And clearly this was going to be a major issue because if one of them married her, that would piss off the other ones, and then there could be fighting, there could be entire wars based on whatever happened with Helen. So they got together and they made a pact, all of these kings and princes. And the idea was, okay, we're going to make a mutual aid treaty that whoever Helen picks will marry her, but we're all going to be friends after that, and anybody who gets in trouble, we're all going to go and help. So they were all bound by this agreement. So that's then when Helen goes to Troy, whether she was taken or went voluntarily, it doesn't matter. Then Agamemnon could go and round up everybody and say, all right, we all made an agreement. Let's go help out my brother. And yeah, exactly, Eridan's. Women are only there for helping to move along the plot of the men. But yeah, not all of them actually wanted to go fight when it came time to fight. Notably, well, Achilles' story is a little bit special. It's partly that he didn't want to go, but it's also other people were influencing him. But yeah, when they went to pick Achilles, he was in drag. He was disguised as a lady, and then Odysseus tricked him by laying out things and like, okay, lady, what would you like out of these many treasures? And there were, jewelry and things, and then there was a sword mixed in, and aha, Achilles, even in disguise as a lady, went for the sword. So they knew, aha, you're Achilles. But even more famous, though, is Odysseus. Odysseus, who is, well, I mean, I can't stand Odysseus, but he is one of the Greek heroes. They go to Odysseus, and he doesn't want to go so badly that he pretends like he's crazy. He's like, and, oh, he's a crazy man. We can't take him to war. But they trick him too into revealing that he is in fact sane, and he does have to go. Yeah, Tiny Chris. So at the end of the Trojan War, Paris is killed. Troy is sacked. The Greeks reclaim Helen, and she goes back home with Menelaus, and they live happily ever after. Yeah. So yeah, the movie decides to, or they decided for the movie, to kill off a bunch of these main characters who, in the ancient stories, they survive, they go home, they have more adventures, there's more story there to mine. Again, people have talked about whether or not they were looking to possibly do a sequel, possibly do an Odyssey story based on this. But it's like, I mean, so many of the secondary characters that should have been in that movie, you just killed off for some reason. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of drama in here without killing off those characters. Homer made it work. You think they could have done it too, but I guess not. But yeah, just again with the gods, and like the Trojan horse part of the movie. First of all, it's so abrupt and so fast tacked on. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody question that scene, and like does it make sense in the movie the way they put it? It doesn't seem to me like it does. Nobody seems that reverent to the gods in that movie that they would care, or that they would care about like looking at this horse as a reverential object, or that they would care enough to bring it in and not destroy it. Like, who cares in the movie? Like, they don't care about the gods. They say they care about the gods, but they don't spend much time worshiping the gods, and the gods don't show up or anything like that. The war happens so quickly. I don't know. It seems like the Trojan horse falls really flat in the movie. Maybe that could just be me. But again, in the stories, and again, Trojan horse not in the Iliad, because the end of the war doesn't matter in the Iliad. It's all about Achilles' anger in the book. But after the events of the Iliad, fighting goes on. And again, like I mentioned in the watch along, fighting at Troy is dragged on for more than 10 years, and they're like, we have to figure out a way to end this thing. So a couple different things happen. They get a prophecy. There's a fetch quest. They have to go and retrieve a couple people need to be there for the end of the fight. A couple items they need to end the fight. They go and get those. And then even still, Odysseus comes up with the idea of the Trojan horse. So that was accurate in the movie. Odysseus, it was his idea. He made it. But it's a really big deal in the mythology, right? There's this construct that's dedicated to the gods, so the Trojans can't just destroy it. They make it seem like the rest of them leave, but the Trojans do. The Trojans are not stupid, right? They find this horse. In most of the stories, there's somebody left there to tell them that, why it's there and what it means. And the Trojans decide to take it in, but they do test it. There's a tradition of somebody like jabs a spear into its belly, and like everybody inside has to be quiet and watch out for it. And again, there are really great stories. Not all the Trojans think they should bring it in. Notably, Cassandra, who does not appear in the movie, because how the hell would you explain her in the confines of the movie Troy? Helen is another child of Paris, a child of Priam, sister to Paris and Hector. And Cassandra has the gift of prophecy, but the curse of nobody ever believing her. She was Apollo had once wanted to get with her, if you know what I mean, and she was like, nah. And then Apollo said, well, I'll give you the gift of prophecy. She said, okay, cool. And then he did, and then she still refused him, and they said, well, F you, nobody will ever believe you. So Cassandra says, don't bring in this horse. It's going to be disastrous. And they're like, nah, we're not going to believe you. But there's another character whose name is Laocoon. And you might know this from art history, if anybody here has done art history. One of the most amazing pieces of statuary out of the ancient world depicts Laocoon and his sons. Laocoon was a priest, and he recognized the trouble that this horse would be. And he very vociferously said to everybody, don't bring in, I'm just looking for a picture, because this is one of the coolest dang things. He said, don't bring in this horse. And then as he was saying this, out on the beach, a serpent came out of the water and took him and his children and killed them. And everybody watching said, holy crap, don't listen to what that guy said. Do the opposite. Now, of course, it was the gods that made it happen. The gods at that point had basically decided, okay, Troy's got to fall. It's fixed. It's happening. So don't listen to him. But this statue, it's just, hold on, I'm bringing up the picture now. Hold on. Well, it's going to be small. But, I mean, don't report me. I mean, technically there's kind of genitalia, but it's art, so I don't think it should really matter. Yeah, Ozai, yeah, I've seen it too. Oh, it's amazing. So here it's depicted as essentially like snakes, but they're grabbing Laocoon and his kids, and like just the reported, thank you. Just like the movement and the textures and it's absolutely, it's stunning. If you're into art history and like how they just sculpting, it's really fantastic. And you can go online and see, better pictures and turnarounds and the whole thing. Yeah, and there were a lot of statues where like there was an original one, and then later there were even in the ancient world there were copies of statues, and sometimes they would add things or do them slightly differently, but yeah. So yeah, the Trojans weren't idiots. They had people there who were concerned about the Trojan horse, but it was brought in. Achilles, at the end of this book, so the Iliad ends with Achilles has defeated Hector in battle. That all is pretty accurate. They have their duel. Hector is the best warrior among the Trojans. He's really good, but Achilles is better. Achilles also has he's got armor and weapons made by the gods. He's got the gods are all on his side. He has the best luck. It wasn't going to go any other way. But yes, Achilles succumbs to his rage and ties Hector to his chariot, drags him. That's a no-no. You're not supposed to do things like that. But on the other hand, the gods do protect the body of Hector, so it isn't completely mangled as Achilles is attempting to do so. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. Achilles went really full on rage, but then he goes back to his tents, and he's not fulfilled. Even killing Hector and desecrating his body does not relieve Achilles of the rage and the anger he has built up for Patroclus dying and for his lack of glory. He's just like, what am I even doing? So Priam does come to see Achilles in the middle of the night. He does have magic weapons, it's true. And again, Priam only makes it to the tent, you call it the tent of Achilles, with the help of the gods. But he does go there, and yeah, it's it's one of the most unbelievable scenes here in the Iliad. But Priam shows up and he gets down on his knees and he beseeches the man who killed his son. Well, I mean, many of his sons are dying in this war, but his main son, and like, you know, anyway, beseeches him to give back the body, let them bury and honor Hector. And they talk about death and about, you know, about glory and about remembering people. And Achilles does relent, and it is a catharsis for Achilles, and that's how he throws off the rage that he has gotten about not getting his glory. So that's how the Iliad ends. And then Priam does take the body back, and they do have this period of a truce period where the Trojans are able to honor Hector with the full burial rites, the games, the whole deal. Knowing, though, that at the end of that, they are going to start the conflict up once again. Again, other sources tell us that the battle started up again. Achilles would fight again, but then would die to the arrows of Paris. The whole Achilles heel thing, that is not in Homer, in the Iliad or the Odyssey. It does not mention him being particularly invulnerable or the heel business. That's in other stories. That's not to say that those stories are later or don't matter, but they're just specifically not in Homer. It does talk about, though, that Achilles died to the arrows of Paris because Apollo was guiding his hand when he was shooting him. So that's how he died. So yes, so Achilles will die technically relatively shortly after the Iliad again, and then all of the stuff to end the war. Not exactly. Okay, you leave. Thank you. You should not be in here. Go. Go. Thank you. What else did I want to talk about? Yeah, like I said, they kill off a lot of characters in the movie that just didn't die during the war in the stories, but what are you gonna do? Aeneas. They did include Aeneas, which I thought was cool. Again, I don't know if they were thinking of doing an Aeneid movie at some point. Many of the heroes of Troy are members of Priam's family. They're either his sons or they are nephews or cousins. A lot of them are related. Some of them are from nearby towns, and one of those is the character of Aeneas. I will spell it out. It is a name that people often get mistaken and make fun of. Aeneas is one of the heroes of Troy. He fights in the Iliad, like we read about him. And notably, there's a mention that he is going to survive. He's going to escape the defeat of Troy, and he has his own destiny that's going to be separate from Troy. And what happens later is that the Romans, they pick Aeneas out of the Iliad, and they're like, that's our guy. So Aeneas becomes part of the founding mythology of Rome, that he's a Trojan, that he left Troy. He like literally carried his old dad on his back when he left, and he brought his little son with him, and eventually made his way in a very Odyssean adventure to Italy, and then helped found Troy. Yeah, exactly. It and as I said, it builds into this whole bigger narrative of Rome versus Greek city-states. It's a whole thing, but that was cool that they did include that in the movie. They certainly didn't have to. It came completely out of the blue in the film, but sure. Aeneas, again, is a really great character in the Netflix series. I recommend it. And yeah, there's a whole series of the returns, as they call it, of all these characters, all the Greek characters, Troy falls. Oh, and as I mentioned, in the sacking of Troy, a bunch of the Greeks do really bad stuff. Most notably, the other Ajax. So there's the Ajax that I like, who is Ajax the Greater, or Telamonian Ajax. His dad was named Telamon. There's another Ajax. It was a common name. Ajax the Lesser, or Oilean Ajax, because his dad was named Oileus. Thank you, Rabbit that. Did they use paper or plastic? Yeah. So some of these Greeks, like they rape women during the sack of Troy. They kill people on as they're holding on to altars and praying to the gods. Like, not things that you're supposed to do. And so those characters, they typically don't make it home. They drown, or they're eaten by something. Bad things happen to them specifically, and they die. Now, of course, bad things happen to other characters who are more heroic, like Odysseus. But as we read in the Odyssey, it takes him forever to get home, and yeah, exactly. It's a bad scene for a lot of characters. Now, also, bad things happen that are part of the war and part of what happens at the end of a war. So we see in the movie, Hector with his wife, Andromache. I don't think anybody ever actually mentions her name in the movie. But why do you need to do that? She's a super great character. She has a really cool name. Andromache, the name means like the might of men, which is a cool name. And their son, Hector, and Andromache's son, Astyanax, which again is a really cool name. At the end of the war, Andromache is taken as a slave, as a captive, just like a lot of the other ladies. Cassandra as well. Astyanax is thrown from the walls of Troy and killed. Specifically to end the line of Priam and make sure that there's nobody who can come back and get revenge for all of the deaths that have happened. Yeah, good witch. Women don't need names. Maybe a number on their dress, but yeah, ridiculous. But yeah, bad stuff happens to a lot of the Trojans. But again, the Greeks, on the other hand, they finish up at Troy and they sail home. And yeah, a lot of them do have adventures on the way home. Menelaus has this whole weird thing where he has to wrestle a sea god to find out how to get home. But then he does get home. And again, the biggest one is Odysseus, which we read about in the Odyssey. Yeah. What else? I mean, I think that's a there are, even in ancient myth, there are some great female characters in mythological stories. So, but that's true. Yeah, the men are much more disposable. I mean, you kill one warrior, there's always another one that's going to come and take his place. Did anyone have any questions or things that you thought weird or good or bad about the movie? It certainly doesn't just need to be my opinions and thoughts. Oh man, when Hector goes to fight and he takes off his helmet and what looks like metal, like he just like peels it up and it's like, oh, okay, that's just a rubber helmet. It's like, like you couldn't have gotten another take on that one. Oh well. I haven't watched, and I don't plan to, but there is a director's cut Cameron was talking about. I think it's significantly longer for an already long movie. I think it's like 20 minutes more or something. That apparently there's more. There's more to the fighting. There's some more gore. But some other stuff is trimmed. I read some notes about it. It sounded interesting, but again, I'm not gonna go and I'm not gonna go and sit through that. Yeah, metal doesn't move like it moved in that scene. Oh yes, Ozai. That's a good. I thank you for mentioning that. Ozai says, "I enjoy Achilles taking off his helmet and saying, 'Now you know who you are fighting.'" The armor that they used in the movie, especially the helmets, uh, not nothing is fully closed up. I guess it could be hard to tell who's who in the rush of battle. Very particular in the movie when Patroclus is wearing Achilles' armor. There's never like a close up of his face. It's always from far off, or he's moving, or his head is turned, and they disguise it. It makes sense within the confines of the movie. In here, every great warrior had very specific armor that had very famous decorations on it. They practically had a sign that said, I'm Sarpedon, this is me, this is my famous armor. Totally. So and again, like the movie does it right and wrong. Obviously, everybody thinks it's Achilles because they recognize the armor. So at least there's the idea that, yes, that is Achilles' armor and everybody knows that. But it's also just like, it's so bland. It's almost interchangeable with anybody else's. It's more like the fighting style is what people are seeing and appreciating. Yeah, but again, in here, Achilles' armor. Oh, and also armor in here is theoretically like it's the panoply style. So it's not just like it's not just a breastplate and like a greaves and whatever. But yeah. And in fact, when Achilles goes to fight and goes to kill Hector, he gets new armor from his mom, who goes and gets it from Hephaestus, that's made. And again, there's almost an entire chapter devoted to describing the armor and the shield and everything that's depicted on the shield. So yeah, like super famous stuff. And again, that's why the armor is so important, that after Achilles dies, then we have the whole conflict between Odysseus and Ajax of who's going to inherit the armor. That's such a big deal and will lead to Ajax's death, and Odysseus thinking about it and remembering it later. It's there's a lot. There's a lot. Rabbit Mom, but yes, thank you for the for the Sarpedon joke. Hudsonizer, is it just me, or is the Trojan War more interesting than, say, the story of Perseus? There's certainly more characters involved and lots of threads. The stories about the other heroes are, they're certainly good. We've got Theseus, Perseus. There's a whole range of heroes that get their own tales. But yeah, the Trojan War is definitely like a culmination of just so much, so many characters. Like I said, so many root causes for the war that came together, and then these characters that will then go on and go in different places and have other adventures. It's like, if you think of it like the MCU, right? You'll have individual heroes get their own movies, sometimes multiple movies, but they all come together. This is the Avengers. This is Infinity War. This is the big grouping of everybody together. I have Ozai. I just finished watching Vikings, which I loved. I have not started watching any of the other. I know there are a couple of other shows that are like similar or considered like the next ones. I have not watched Barbarians yet. No, I've heard about it. That one, and there's at least one other show that's sort of like that. Oh, they speak Latin. Okay, well that's cool. I will definitely check that out. Yes, yeah, I'll have to check it out. I really liked Vikings. I know people had issues with it. That's fine. It is very repetitive, but but they do this really cool. Yes, like the show from beginning to end is about these Vikings, but like constantly backstabbing each other, constantly fighting amongst themselves, going on raids. Who's taking over their home while they're gone on the raids? But the scale of it, it starts so small and it gets so big, and characters are so. I really like the show Vikings. I knew it existed, but I had never watched a second of it before, before the pandemic, and then I watched the whole thing. Yeah, Hudson Eyes. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, the Jason and the Argonauts is, well, that would be more like Jason and the Argonauts is more like. Oh, thank you, Ozai. I'll check that out. If you okay, think about the DC TV shows. So any current DC TV show or modern DC TV show would be about like characters in the Justice League, right? But then you find out, oh, before the Justice League, there was the Justice Society. That is more applicable to, like, this stuff is the Justice League, but the Justice Society, that was like our dads and the legacy characters that came before us. That's more Jason and the Argonauts. Sort of. I don't know. That's one way to look at it. Yeah, Troy. I don't know. They made a bunch of choices. It's not the worst thing ever. It's disappointing. As a classicist, which sounds kind of weird these days. I don't know. I don't really like that term. It could have been so much more. Whatever. What are you gonna do? Does the narrator tell us how super old the Justice Society is? They should. So many Justice Society stories are about how old the characters are and how often they are affected by magic or temporal effects that restore their youth and vitality, and that's a running theme in Justice Society stories over and over again. And then watch out for anything that restores us to our actual age. Yeah, exactly. Arsenal Roy. It's like you just bring in those characters to gift things to other characters. Zardas says, "What is the worst thing ever?" Ooh, that's a good question. All right. I have a really hard time wrapping my brain around the Disney Hercules movie. Because I don't know why it exists. and why they made it the way they did. And again, I mentioned this because Disney. I mean, yeah, that's because merchandise and everything else. So when talking about Troy, and I said, like, okay, if you're gonna go in the direction of like cutting out the gods, like do something with that, like make that interesting, make that some sort of a dynamic to look different and feel different than other stories, or else just do a historical. Like there are plenty of amazing Greek wars and heroes that actually existed that you could do on screen that would be interesting. Savage Punch, thank you so much. 7 months. I very, very much appreciate it. Again, like why pull a mythological story that is so much to do about gods and then cut it out and just like make something more historical feeling, again, based more like on Gladiator than a fancy thing. But again, like Disney took so much, and then it was like, but none of this. We're gonna pretend like none of this. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, even if you know like a little bit about Greek mythology, and you watch that Hercules movie, it's like why why these characters? Why this slight bit of Greek mythology? But then you just change so much. I don't know. It just that one feels really weird to me. Yeah, I don't know. It's just very odd. The so many of the characters in that movie are based on real mythological characters, but just changed drastically, ignoring so much of the like what made these characters so important in the myths, and just yeah, it's strange. It's very strange to me. Ugh, James Wood, man, that guy. So many people related to Hercules things have turned out to be dirtbags. James Wood, Kevin Sorbo. What are you gonna do? But we don't need to get super political right now. I don't like those. I don't like those people. Some of the content they've made in the past is good, but yes, Lucy Lawless. Yes, we still have Lucy Lawless. Yes, The Rock. Good. There are still good ones that we like. Yeah. So anyway, if anybody does have anything that you would like to talk about more about Troy, hit me up on the Discord. Yeah, no, exactly. And like, I'm not saying that Hercules is a bad movie. I'm just saying that it's just really weird, and they went in such weird directions with the characters and with the, even just like with the overall themes and the gods. Some of them, again, if you're gonna go so far into your own world, just make your own world. Just do your own thing. It doesn't. I don't know. But yeah, that's fine. Let's see. Close that. Close out. Have you ever seen anything about the Fate series? So it was like the Fate series pops up a lot in talking about this kind of stuff, and no, I don't. I've never. The only things I know about the Fate series are I used to work for the Japanese collectible company Kotobukiya, so I wrote catalog text for their items, and they did a bunch of Fate stuff. So I would do research so I could write the text, but I don't know, I never watched or read anything beyond that. But I know it's on my list as something that I do need to check out. Yeah, go catch Jessica. She has nothing to do with today's stream, but thanks, Nightbot. Thanks, Nightbot. Yeah, Eridansk, man. Artists. I've talked about this before. I have very strong feelings about getting to know artists and how they really are, and how and if you can separate art from artist, and if you can, that's fine. If you can't, that's also fine. And everybody has a line where you draw what you can accept knowing about someone, and enjoy, and being able to enjoy that art anymore or not. And I have my lines and my properties that I used to really like that I will not watch and appreciate anymore because of who's in it and what they've revealed themselves to be in real life. But I'm not pushing that on other people and telling you what to believe and what to do in your own worlds. Hello, welcome. Yeah, so like I'm not gonna watch. I'm not really gonna. I have no real interest in watching Mel Gibson stuff anymore at all. I mean, I was never a huge fan, but I liked certain Mel Gibson things. But I mean, he's a really terrible human being. So I'm just not going to do that. Roman Polanski, like, I mean, I love some Roman Polanski movies, and I watched them a bunch of times, but I mean, he's a terrible human being. So, nah, not gonna do it anymore. But again, some people are much more able to have that divide, and that's fine. Like I said, I'm not saying that you should do things like the way I do it. Ozai said you'd enjoy Gilgamesh. He's wildly arrogant. Is the originator of idea over here? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, and again, like that's a very complex topic to talk about. Yeah, art and artist. It's yeah. I've I've never had even the slightest desire to watch Apocalypto, so I don't think I'm missing out anything there. That's fine. Mel Gibson is also one of those people that proves that cancel culture is not a thing. Far right people, it's just not, because Mel Gibson is like a total fucking scumbag, and the things that have come out of his mouth are like the most despicable things you could say to another human being. And he's making movies, and he's going on talk shows, and he's back. He made his comeback. Consequences? What consequences? I mean, I guess he had a couple of hard years there, but anyway. Anyway, I don't need to to get. Yeah. Oh, Mark Wahlberg is. Whoa. Again, Mark Wahlberg has an entire section of his Wikipedia page about the hate crimes that he's. Yeah, it's a lot. Now, again, can people change? Yes, I am totally open to people changing. But these people, they haven't changed. They haven't apologized. They haven't. Because that huge asshole a few weeks ago, that Bean Dad guy, right, on Twitter. I tweeted about it after the thing. That guy, right, the Bean Dad thing was like an insane thing. He came off like a total asshole. People went and looked back and found a bunch of awful tweets of his, and he deleted his Twitter account, and then he released a statement that seemed to me, again, I didn't know this guy beforehand, anything like that, but I read the statement. He apologized without reservation. It wasn't like, well, other people took it this way and blah blah blah. It was a step-by-step condemning the things that he had said, showing how he didn't. Well, explaining that like this is a bit that I do with like the pedantic dad, but the way I explained it wasn't good, and oh my god, I didn't realize how that would affect people and how it would trigger people who had abuse in their family. And like, again, I don't know it, but I don't know this guy, but to me at least, it read like a genuine apology, and I'm like, all right, people can change. I'm willing to give this guy another shot after that. So it's not like, I'm not saying that people do something wrong and then you have to, excise them forever and banish them to an island, but they gotta show at least some friggin' remorse and show that what they did like exists. You can't pretend that it never happened. So anyway, Ozai, yeah, that's a good point. Once they're dead, that does change things. I don't know, how did I get onto this subject? But I always want to add though that, again, that if you enjoy Mel Gibson movies, I'm not telling you not to watch a Mel Gibson movie. I'm not like I don't force my opinions on other people. I'm not going to look down on somebody who watches Woody Allen, something like that. Like that's not me. It's all good. these are just things that I wrestle with. Also, like H.P. Lovecraft. Oh my god. Like, what do you do? I'm a huge fan of cosmic horror. I love his creations. I like some of the stories still, and I grapple with, like, oh, he was such a person in pain and not being able to interact with his world, and that turned into just hatred and not accepting of people. And yeah, but it's also, that's a case that, yes, he's been dead for so long, and it's been such a long time that people have been able to grapple with that and take things out of his writing and adapt it and put different spins on it. That's just so cool to see. And the idea that we can have we can have a talk about cosmic horror without having to name things Lovecraftian anymore. Yeah. But again, like, it's, artists are humans, and you're not always going to agree with them, and some of them are going to turn out to be bad humans, and that's something we all got to deal with. Okay, I need to get going. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. I know I don't like to, like, nitpick a movie to death, but like I said, there are parts about Troy that I think are neat. Next week, I think we'll return to reading more Russian stories, because they're super interesting. Yeah, Ozai, I'll definitely get to that. I gotta go take care of the kids for a while, but I'll be on social media later today. So thanks, everybody, and I'll be back tomorrow for Toy Tuesday. We're gonna look at some Firestorm toys, if you're a fan of that character. And then tomorrow afternoon will be Dune with Jessica. Yeah. All right, so have a good day, everybody. Goodbye.